Hey Trailblazers, today we're here with attorney Bob Gabrielse. He is an exemplary Jasper County resident who's humble and doesn't want me to mention his many accolades. But honestly, most of us know you for all these things, your expertise in the law and the many ministries that you help and that you lead. So what kind of law do you practice or enjoy? And are you okay with me asking you a few legal questions today in regards to land specifically?
I'll do my best. I enjoy a lot of real estate work. I would say there's a substantial part of my practice is real estate. And I also work a lot with wills and the simplified estates. There's a way to do that makes them much more simple. And basically things that help people that way. I do not get involved in litigation, and I don't get involved in family law matters, except I've done a lot of adoptions.
Oh, that's nice. That's great. Okay, so in regards to trails, what do you know about the state recreational use statute and how that applies to parks and trails?
That's a very good statute. It's a very interesting statute. It's not all that clear how it's going to be interpreted in the future because courts interpret fact situations and whether this statute fits that. So when it says that you can go upon land for recreational purposes, that seems like a nice, clear, black and white situation. However, most fact situations are not so black and white. Did I go on there believing that you would have raked it or, taken the boulders out of the way or whatever? And if so, what led me to believe that was the case? If I can show that you indicated to me that it was safe, now you've taken on a responsibility. So if an owner has exercise some sort of responsibility toward maintenance of that cuts through the statute in some ways. The statute seems to be more of a pure kind of statement that if a landowner who has nothing to do with this land, maintenance-wise, has somebody come on the land, that he is protected from an unwanted lawsuit because he had nothing to do with it. When you know that there's a trail put on there, then a landowner is naturally, in my opinion, going to ask, what is the liability?
Sure.
If somebody gets seriously injured on there, am I going to be at fault or being sued?
Mm-hmm. Fair question.
There's a chance that he would be joined in any lawsuit anyway, although there's a very good chance he might be able to just get himself dismissed out as well because of statutes like this. They're very fact-sensitive situations. And so my advice would be to probably contact some attorneys who specialize in this area and get their opinions before you proceed. That's number one. Number two, I would say that you should probably look into insurance. Maybe your organization can get the insurance. Maybe the landowner could be contacted and say, would your insurance cover this? Most insurance companies would rather opt out of all liability situations,
Sure.
And they always rely on disclaimers to get away from responsibility for an accident or an injury. And so they are not going to be saying, well, yeah, we'd be glad to cover that,
Right.
So it is a legitimate concern for the landowner, and I think it seriously has to be addressed. If a landowner chooses to deed the property to the organization, now he's not responsible any longer because he's taken that strip of land and set it off to some other owner.
Right.
Now he's not responsible.
Right.
But if he chooses to want to own his land all the way to the edge and give an easement across it, then it becomes a little bit of a problem. That's why so many people have others sign disclaimers or releases of responsibility if you're on my land. Well, that's impractical for the trails organizations to have those because it's meant to be, hey, I'm going to go take a walk. Let's go do it now. I can't stop and sign releases,
Right.
for every landowner.
Right.
So insurance and liability are issues. Encourage landowners to deed the strip to you. That obviously will take it off of their shoulders. They would no longer worry about it. So I guess that's some serious things to look into for the landowner and the organization.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that and all your advice because we want to be doing this right, and so we're just trying to check all these boxes and make sure we're getting everybody covered, and it's a safe experience for all.
That's being thorough.
Yeah. You had a sidewalk that either wasn't planned or was poorly planned by your office many years ago. Why did you move this sidewalk, and how did you do that successfully?
Well, the town of DeMotte decided to widen and improve Halleck Street. and it was a 2-lane, gravel-shouldered, typical county kind of highway is what it looked like when I moved into town. Sometime later, they decided to make it into a 3-lane with a turn lane in the middle and put curbs in. And then this issue came up, what about sidewalks? Well, they had a limited amount of right-of-way to work within. So they got sort of toward the edge of that when you start making a 3-lane highway, then curbs, and then sidewalk. So the plan was we will put the sidewalk directly on the curb. So your fast lane is your outside lane on a 3-lane highway. It goes along the curb, and if they were going to put a 5-foot sidewalk right against the curb, then our kids would be riding bicycles alongside of a curb separated from the fast lane by nothing.
Kind of like Hebron has?
Yeah. Okay. And so what happens is that a few of us felt that that was not a good idea. So I approached the town board at one of their meetings, and I said, I have some suggestions here. Why don't we move the sidewalk back 5 feet and put a grass parkway in there? The response was, we don't have enough right-of-way. And I appreciate that. They didn't. It's a lot of work to go condemn a piece of property for public purposes and take it over and take it away from each landowner along there and then have to compensate them. So I said, what happens if we as landowners would donate land to give that additional land to you, donate right-of-way, even though we own the land yet? And there was sort of a chuckle like, how is that going to happen all along Halleck Street? Well, it did happen, okay? And
because of you.
Well, I was involved in it. And I went to many, many landowners, and almost every one of them agreed that they would think that the sidewalk should be back further. And since they all had their buildings up, it wasn't going to interfere with their buildings. But some of them had vacant land. And they said, if we move the right-of-way back, that means we have to move our setback for our buildings back further. So we addressed that problem. And the town agreed that they would change their ordinances to reduce that setback amount by the amount of land that the landowner donated. Well, that means we could widen the right-of-way and still not affect our future use of the land. They would never build their building up next to the road or anything like that. They wouldn't be allowed to. So we just moved the setback line for them. And it worked perfectly. I think there was only a handful along the entire stretch that the town was required to pay money to get that taken care of.
And really, it's for safety, and then it's also aesthetically nicer. Like, it really looks so good by your office and that stretch over there. So thank you for already helping the pedestrian movement in our area. I mean, that was a labor of love, the amount of time, I'm sure, with all the...
It was interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of deeds to prepare, a lot of conversations with landowners, and they were very cooperative.
Yeah.
They could see the value of that.
Yeah, that's great. So you're ready for that again?
No.
Right.
You mean with trails?
Right. Okay. Do you anticipate any workarounds that we might need to consider with landowners, or anything kind of popped in your head that, you thought of that maybe we're missing?
I think the first thing you have to address is the liability and insurance. Because if you came to me and proposed to put something through the back of my lot on Halleck Street there, first thing I would say, well, how is this going to be insured, and what exposure do I have? So I think you almost have to get that nailed down first before you start talking with landowners. You have to have something in writing saying, this is what we understand the law to be, this is what we understand our insurance options are, this is what we understand your insurance company would say or react, how they would react. They're going to want to know those things before they commit to anything.
So that would be if the person kept it in their name. So if they would donate that small piece, then it would just be on us and how we worked out with the town and the county.
Yes.
So, okay.
I've had some experience with subdivisions and walking trails being proposed. And the questions always arise is, number one, do we want all the foreigners running through our property, jogging through our property, through our backyards and things like that? And the liability issues, as always, come in. And most of the developers find that if they have lots and people know there's a walking trail behind them, a few people are excited about that, and many are very put off by that. Because the perception is that stranger walking through your backyard is a threat to you. I think that research has shown from what's been explained to me that those strangers who use walking paths are generally not the threatening kind of people. They're out for physical health and they're out
Right.
as wholesome kind of people. Could it be misused? Absolutely. But it's a strange way to commit a crime in somebody's backyard when you're on foot and you don't have a car handy,
Right,
and
right.
there's no escape. I mean, it's just not the ideal crime situation.
Right. And that's what we have been told as well is if your town is safe, then your parks, alleys, sidewalks, trails are safe. If your area is not safe, then your parks, alleys, sidewalks,
That's correct.
is not. So back to the subdivision question. Can you explain the importance of why it is to pre-plan it for these connection zones, like in a subdivision, as opposed to trying to do it after the fact?
Sure. There's one very practical answer to that. You're dealing with just the developer when you get it set up, whereas if you try and do it after the fact, you're dealing with 100 landowners, and any one of them could deny it, and that cuts your trail off. You see?
So you would have, for a subdivision, we would have to have 100% agreement of that plat
because
to have
when
any changes after the fact.
Yeah, because when the homeowner buys that plat, that lot, he's got defined borders, and that's his. And you cannot force him to change that except by his agreement. Our property laws simply say that's what it is.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, pre-planning is important. And we would like to see some of these like new subdivisions that come about, that if they're along like an arterial county road, like we love that side path, like across from DeMotte
Yes.
Christian High School, more of that kind of stuff, because as the subdivisions grow, it brings houses, more people, more traffic. And then, if we don't have these pedestrian routes to get around, it's just going to be more people and cars on the road and not a safe situation.
See, and then a developer will react to that by saying, okay, that sounds fine, but how does it involve me? And then you have to be ready to step forward and say, either you have to put it in if you agree to it, or just reserve it for this and allow us to put it in.
Right.
You see, because developers do not want to pay all those extra costs to put curbs and sidewalks and all that stuff in when they're not necessary. Some of your private subdivisions, like some I've been involved in, are out in the country, and you almost don't need a sidewalk. I mean, the road is your sidewalk. There's no cars, because if we design them, a lot of planners want to design them with through streets. Mm-hmm. I would rather have through walkways and closed streets. And a cul-de-sac is where people want to live because they're cut off from through traffic. Okay, and it's safe to walk and ride your bikes on those kinds of roads. Okay, but once you get through streets, now you've forced the pedestrian traffic off to sidewalks or paths. And so it all depends on the nature of the subdivision. But then
Right.
I think maybe the subdivisions ought to have a reserved path between lots that goes to the next subdivision.
Yeah.
You see?
I
Not
love
for
that.
cars,
Right.
but for pedestrian traffic.
Yes, exactly. I like that thinking. And that's something our group too would really like if developers would be open to saving some of those spaces before we are more landlocked. As we know, this Jasper County Trails Club, but DeMotte is a community that is experiencing the most growth, being close to the region and that. So we just want to kind of pre-plan and think for where our routes are going to go if we could save some of that space.
Sure.
It'd be helpful.
On our subdivisions, we usually use a larger setback than required, and we have a 75-foot setback in some subdivisions. That's plenty of room for a walking area up in front.
Right.
But if you have a closed subdivision that's not open to all kinds of through streets, which is a safer subdivision, then you really don't need those special walking paths either inside the subdivision.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And this might be more of an accountant question, but say we have a landowner that's willing to donate one of, these small slivers. Can that be a tax deduction for them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's as long as it's made to a not-for-profit. Okay.
Okay.
I've experienced that myself with Mobility Ministries. We've had land donated to us. We had an appraisal done, and the appraised value was something that landowner could use on his tax return as a deduction against taxes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a win on both sides there. Mm-hmm. And since you brought up Mobility Ministries, I would like to mention it, if that's okay.
That's okay.
I know you don't want me to put you on a pedestal as a community leader, but you really are. And you do so much. And we might have listeners here that aren't aware of what Mobility Ministries is. Do you mind sharing what you guys do there, what that organization is about?
Interestingly enough, It has nothing to do with walking. It has to do with the inability to walk, okay? And we make tricycle shaped kind of vehicles, good, sturdy, strong vehicles that are used by people who cannot walk, who are crawling on the ground in different parts of the world in underdeveloped countries. And they're not used in this country at all, but they would be the kind of thing that you would see on a walking path, just like you'd see a wheelchair. It's a way to get around. It's an off-road kind of moving vehicle for these people, and they're hand-cranked.
I love that you guys do that. You serve so many people by doing that, globally, and it is a form of, non-motorized transportation for people who can't walk, and amazing things God is doing through your leadership and your team there. Like, that's exciting. So.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It's a good ministry for our local 55 volunteers. I call them really non-paid employees because they're very faithful about being there. They don't just come and go. Yeah. And it's a ministry for them, and it's a ministry for the people who are crawling on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, what a blessing. What do you like most about our Jasper County Trails Club project? Is there anything about our project that you like? Well,
I like the fact that you're sticking with it, okay? It's a hard, long road to go, and you're finding that out already. But I guess with anything I've been involved in too, you got to keep on it and keep at it. I think the advantage is exactly what you say the advantages are. It's bringing people together with community. It's getting people from other areas that you're willing to talk to. They're walking past your house, and you engage them in conversation and things like that. That always helps. It never hurts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, on behalf of Jasper County Trails Club, I want to thank you so much, Bob, for your advice, for coming on this podcast, for your support of what we're trying to do here, and just all that you do, in our community and in the county. So, well, thank you.
I'm serious when I say it's a privilege to be part of something like this, because I think it's good for all of us.
Yeah. All right, Jasper County. Well, keep exploring.